There's one glaring flaw in Zay Flowers' fantasy profile that has kept him out of the top 10 wide receivers in points per game. But Declan Doyle coming in might be the perfect time for that to change. And if it does, Zay's wide receiver 17 price tag pays off in a big way. That coming in from our very own Yahoo fantasy football analyst, Josh Norris, co host of the Yahoo Fantasy Football with Josh and Hayden, who joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Josh, and welcome in to Yahoo Sports
Of
Daily. We're
course.
happy to have you. So we had Zay Flowers get paid yesterday. What needs to change this season for him to have that breakout fantasy season?
It simply put, it's red zone opportunities. So over the last two seasons, just 17 red zone targets for Zay Flowers. In fact, Olamide Zaccheaus had more red zone targets and touchdowns last season for Zay Flowers. That doesn't add up when you think about trying to get your best players the ball in the most critical areas of the field. Todd Monken, built his red zone passing game around the likes of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Obviously, you have Lamar Jackson and definitely Derrick Henry running the football. But in order for Zay Flowers to really pay off as an early fourth round pick, he does just have to do what he did last year. But in order to, finally reach that top 10 fantasy points per game status that we all hopefully believe he can and, has the skills to do it, it is simply maybe even doubling that opportunity and creating and diagramming opportunities to get him some real touchdown opportunities, because he needs to hit about that 10 touchdown mark in order to get there.
Josh, every time that I'm talking to one of our wonderful fantasy analysts, I really wish that I could have the conversation, privately or by text, so that all of my fellow owners would not get in on all of these great tips. But I am told that I have to ask this publicly now, so I will go ahead. Other than Zay Flowers, what are some other wide receivers that you think might be flying under the radar? Everyone knows the big names. Who are some other receivers that you think people ought to be targeting for their second or third wide receiver slot?
Love that. Christian Watson would be one for me. He's going in the middle of the sixth round right now on Yahoo. I think when people sit back and close their eyes and think of what Christian Watson is, he's just this high variance vertical player who, can run really hot and score at a crazy rate like he did during his rookie season. But his game transformed last year, and that's coming off a, significant knee injury. He was the Packers' go-to wide receiver. Like third and six critical situations, he was the ISO route winner, and his out route numbers jumped from about 7% previously in his career up to 35% last season. So for a Packers team that gave us so much frustration over the years because of the cycles that they had and in and out, and we didn't know who was going to be on the field at any one time, finally it is straightforward. It is Christian Watson, it is Jaden Reed, and it is Matthew Golden. And I think Christian Watson has a legit chance, as long as he stays on the field, to easily finish as the Packers' number one wide receiver and really make good on his fantasy draft slot by about 2 rounds. He's one of my favorite picks in fantasy football this year.
Ooh, I will keep that one in my back pocket for whenever I do my drafting. I want to move on to the quarterback position because we have several quarterbacks in new places. We have quarterbacks in the same places, but with different coaching staffs and different offensive coordinators. So which of those quarterbacks that are in a new situation do you think could have a big year?
My brain immediately jumps to Jaden Daniels. Last year we were taking him as the second or third quarterback off the board. Right now he's quarterback 5, according to Yahoo, in the middle of the 5th round. I mean, we are rich with quarterback talent right now. So if you really want to wait and stay patient and draft a quarterback later on, then that's totally fine. That's one strategy. Or you can think of Jaden Daniels, who now in a David Blau offense is going to be asked to do a lot more traditional stuff, work from under center, and they're going to incorporate lots more play action, lots more motion. He had a fantastic rookie year with Cliff Kingsbury, but then everything just got stale and static last year and a bit predictable. And so now entering year 3 here for Jaden Daniels, I don't know how much we're going to see him in preseason action, but he is one of those players that I can't wait to see how comfortable he looks in weeks 3, 4, 5, because this David Blau system, who played under Ben Johnson at the Detroit Lions, is really going to take this offense into like a more consistent traditional style that is really more prevalent across the league right now.
Now, you just had a video come out about 11 players that can win you a fantasy championship, the kind of guys that will come on strong, perform well over expectations, and make every other owner in your league jealous that you thought to pick that guy up. What is a name on the list that you think might be a little bit undervalued, underexpected, under the radar that could end up winning you the fantasy championship?
Oh, I mean, what a great question. Honestly, all my videos kind of run together at this point, so I'm going to do my best to pick out one. Like, to me, the headliner this year, and I understand I'm talking about a second round pick, but it's Brock Bowers. Like, if he hits what Travis Kelce did in 2020 or what 2023, or maybe 2022, in terms of scoring 6 more points than the tight end 2 out there, or most importantly, 8 points, 9 points more than the tight end 5 that we're talking about. And that gives you a leg up, a natural advantage over your competition any given week. And again, that's talking about the tight end 1 versus the tight end 5, not the tight end 12 on any given week. So Clint Kubiak coming into this offense, we saw what he did last year with a third year Jackson Smith and Jigba with, 51% of his receiving production coming out of, heavier looks with just 2 or fewer wide receivers on the field, despite that only being 38% of the routes that he ran. I know that the body types, the positional tag is different from Jackson Smith and Jigba and Brock Bowers, but I really think he can do the same exact thing, funnel everything through Brock Bowers, who we already know set records during his rookie season. So it's tough to click a tight end's name in round 2 when you have that glut of running backs that we love, when you have wide receivers like Nico Collins or Drake London. But I really think that Brock Bowers might be the difference maker when we look back on it, because you could simply draft Amon-Ra St. Brown in round 1 and then have his production copied in round 2 by Brock Bowers this year. And I can't wait to see what he does in this offense.
Go Dogs.
Let's stick in Vegas, because I remember last year going into about fantasy draft time, Ashton Genty was kind of one of the sexy picks. I remember Jason Fitz saying he is my number 1 overall pick, which might have something to do with his Raiders fandom, but still Ashton Genty was viewed as, a high volume impact running back. Clearly he didn't have that kind of production last season. Who would be that kind of buyer beware name that everybody is talking about right now that you don't think will deliver?
Am I able to repeat it? Like, it really might be Ashton Genty all over again. Like, this is someone who's basically going in the exact same slot as he was drafted last year. And I guess my question is why? Like, what has really changed here? He's still going to own, top 2 or top 3 in terms of his team's market share of touches at the running back position. But if you look at it, the Las Vegas Raiders are projected to score the 28th most points in the NFL last year. They're obviously dead last season. I would expect a few more touchdowns. But simply put, like, I'll ask you guys, why draft Ashton Genty when, like, Saquon Barkley is going 1 or 2 slots later? Saquon Barkley a couple of years ago was the player that you needed in fantasy football. There's so much conversation around this Eagles passing attack and how that is going to determine their season, and what can Sean Mannion pluck out of Jalen Hurts? How is Devontae Smith going to, step in for AJ Brown as wide receiver 1? I'll tell you this, none of it matters unless they get back to the great rushing attack that they had with Saquon Barkley, how he was super explosive, how he also had a great success rate. And that is the key to everything, because when that works, that changes the math and coverage. That makes the passing game even easier. So I am consistently drafting Saquon Barkley ahead of Ashton Genty, even though we're talking about an older-ish running back versus the year 2 guy.
Now, when we get to the NFL draft, there's always a player or two that just gets absurdly overhyped. The media falls in love with him, whether because of his story, because of his school, whatever it might be. I know that you mentioned Ashton Genty and that aspect, but who are some players that you are seeing get a little too much hype? You might be casting a little bit of a side eye at them, thinking, is that guy really worth that high draft pick? Who's someone that falls into that category for you?
You're asking me to be a negative Norris this morning, but I understand. I can do it. I'm a little bit worried about David Montgomery and the Houston Texans. When you draft him in the middle of round 5 right now, it makes sense. Like, the equation in your head, it's, they made a move for him so he can lead this backfield in touches. And as we know, volume matters most when it comes to running back points in fantasy football. I guess opposite end of that statement would be, this is your typical what we call a dead zone back. Like that is the profile, right? Just assumed workload trumps everything. Dave Montgomery, we've seen his best football already in the NFL. You're not drafting him because of the great play caller that he's attached to. I'll ask you guys, like, what has Nick Caley done in the NFL that makes us say, oh yeah, this guy's one of the best OCs in the league? And then you're not drafting him because of a great offensive line, because they again have reshuffled it for like the third straight season. So while Dave Montgomery might step in there and reach 250 carries and all this stuff, this is just a rushing attack over the last couple of years that has not been great, that you are just drafting him purely based on the number of carries he's going to get. And that doesn't even factor in, some passing down work that Woody Marks is going to have. So I'm mostly in my strategy taking 2 running backs early and then spending that round 3, 4, 5 territory, drafting a whole bunch of wide receivers, because I would much rather select, Terry McLaurin or Luther Burden in the same round that David Montgomery's going in drafts right now.
You said we're going to ask you to be a negative Norris. Now let's ask you to be a joyful Josh.
Okay,
well done.
Number 1 overall pick. Who would yours be?
Oh, I mean, it's the 2 people you just talked about. Like, you can go Jahmyr Gibbs, you can go Bijan Robinson. Both are simply fantastic. I love that Bijan got his contract, because as we have seen over the last couple of years, if you do miss training camp, that does linger into the season. So I'm really hoping we'll get Jahmyr Gibbs back onto the practice field. The one determining factor between the two, and why I am taking Jahmyr Gibbs over Bijan Robinson, simply put, the markets say that the Lions offense is much better than the Atlanta Falcons offense. Like, the Lions are projected for the 3rd most points in the league this season, and compare that to the Atlanta Falcons 25th. So I'm not saying you shouldn't take Bijan, because as we know, he catches all the passes, he scores all the touchdowns basically for the team, unless your name is Drake London and or Kyle Pitts. But just simply put, when you are projected to score, 5 more points on a weekly basis, that adds up throughout the entire season, and more points for your team usually means more points in our fantasy football back pocket. So I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs number 1 overall this year.
Now, I was going to ask you about tight ends and Brock Bowers, but you already buttoned that up. So let's flip over to the other side of the ball. When you're looking at defenses, what do you look for in a defense, and who would be your number 1 defense off the board this year?
Yeah, you're really asking me to go deep here. With defenses, it's one of those things where I'm going to wait until the very last round to select my defense. Just overall in the NFL, unless you have the Seahawks, the Texans, or the Broncos, you're going to change your defense on basically any given week, other than for matchup purposes, because really what it comes down to is sacks and turnovers. That's what gives you the most fantasy points with defenses, and that's not necessarily sticky week to week with the great defenses out there. It's more sticky against the worst opponents. And so I want to attack the teams that are facing the Cleveland Browns. I want to attack the teams that are facing the Arizona Cardinals, or whoever else, the backup quarterbacks out there that are stepping in during that week. And so for me, the defense game is very, very much a week-to-week dilemma versus who I'm going to draft them at the end of the first round, or excuse me, at the end of my fantasy drafts.
So, Josh, I am a proof of concept person. I want to see it before I can really buy into it. But if there was one rookie that you think that I should trust in my upcoming fantasy draft, who would that guy be?
I will say, like, this rookie class, it's just overall disappointing. So it can be a bit tough to really buy into any of them. One I'm going to throw at you, and I can't wait to see what he does in preseason, is Jadarian Price and the Seattle Seahawks. And, I just had a conversation with Hayden and Nate Tice on our show yesterday, and I don't know how I feel about Jadarian Price right now. Like, I told everyone to draft Ken Walker III last summer. It didn't work out until it really did, and then I can say that, hey, he would have been a fantastic pick if he had gotten, the majority of the run. Now, heading into this year, it seems like a franchise state of mind that they're going to have a split backfield no matter what, even if Zach Charbonnet is not healthy until week 5, week 6. And so that means like Jadarian Price is splitting time with George Halani, which I guess we should factor in here. We should factor in here. But if you're also telling me on the opposite side of that coin, if I'm able to draft a first round rookie running back, albeit like the 32nd overall pick in round 6, and the only person I have to worry about taking opportunities away from him is a pure passing down player in George Holani, then Jadarian Price is one of those guys that in the preseason, if he reels off one big run or one big catch, I could see his ADP climb 1 or 2 rounds a la Amir Abdullah during his rookie season. So Jadarian Price is one of those players that I'm going to have a heavy focus in on over the next 3 weeks in terms of his preseason work, see how he looks, see how he stacks up against NFL competition, because as you both know, he barely played at Notre Dame. I mean, barely played 19 targets over the last 3 years. So he has a lot to prove, but if he does that in this 3 or 4 week sample, he could be a significant value in round 6.
All right, I loved your strategy there about picking the defense last. So let's talk a little bit of draft strategy here. We all know the basics. You know, you pick the running back or the marquee wide receiver early, and then you pair him with Brock Bowers if you can get him in the second round. But are there any unconventional draft strategies that you like? I mean, obviously it depends on where you're picking in the draft, but you know, is there anything, any zag where everyone else is zigging, where you like to employ something that catches your fellow owners off guard during the draft?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. So later on, when we get to, I don't know, round 10 or round 11 or round 9, I think you could easily make the case that the tight ends in that area just totally outscore the wide receivers. Namely, like Chigo Kwankwo, for example, is going in the 11th round. Some wide receivers in that range are Xavier Worthy, Wan'Dale Robinson. I could list a few more. Chico Kwankwo, unless the Commanders go out and sign Stephon Diggs, has a real pathway to being his team's second target earner, second best receiver in this passing game. And like again, talking about the Commanders, he could be David Blau's like Sam Laporta, who you can hide in the running game a little bit, but he really comes alive in the passing game in terms of motioning him, getting him in stacks, lining him up a wide receiver, all this type of stuff. And just a couple of years ago, Sam Laporta was the top scoring tight end, albeit in a down tight end season. So tight ends are on my radar quite a bit. Like I started the offseason saying, okay, you got to draft Brock Bowers, Colson Loveland, or Tyler Warren, and then wait and wait and wait. But the more I dig in and the more homework I do this summer, like I can make a great case for Kyle Pitts. I can make a great case for Sam Laporta. Both those guys are in round 6. But if I am waiting, then Chigo Kwankwo is someone that has my eye in round 11.